Hello guys, this is your friend Naruto Addict 2.0 and we are back with a new fanfic. Which is What If God Like Naruto Got Married with Hinata and Anko, Part 2. And if you enjoy this fanfic then please press the like button and subscribe to my channel for more fanfic like this. And now let's start the fanfic. Tazuna was waiting for Naruto to show up. He and his grandson Inari had quickly come to the conclusion to accept the offer. In all honesty, they had decided to accept as soon as Naruto left 2 months ago. The two men had been designing buildings and village layouts for the past 2 months. Tsunami, though not experienced in buildings and the works, often gave a quick suggestion when the two men went over their plans. Men could be very single-minded sometime. The lady of the house was just preparing lunch when she heard her son shouting that Naruto had arrived. She wasn't looking forward to this day. Both her father and her son would be leaving for spirits know how long, while she had to remain here. Or did she? Surely they needed someone to support them. Yes, she would not remain here alone, she would join them. As soon as she stepped out of the kitchen, Inari rushed in to get his and his grandfather's belongings. Apparently they would leave right away. Once outside, she greeted the new arrival. He asked her a question which nearly made her drop the tray of tea she had been holding and shoot inside faster than her son had just a minute ago. Are you ready to go, Tsunami-san? Tazuna asked if it was okay for her to come with, to which Naruto merely chuckled and said that he needed a woman's touch. And in his case he could use several women's opinions about designing a complete village. To both males' amusement, Tsunami was out sooner than Inari and the woman hadn't even prepared to leave beforehand. The group of 4 would head to Konoha. It would be easier to travel to the island from there, even though they were now technically closer to it. The journey wasn't all that eventful besides one bandit attack. They were easily dispatched by Naruto, but Tsunami was a bit more introverted after that, constantly looking over her shoulder. It took Naruto almost a full day to assure her of her safety. She blushed at his words. I will protect you with my life. Spirits, how she loved to hear a man say it to her. She would have to get herself in some more problems soon. After 4 days of traveling, the group arrived. They went straight for Naruto's apartment and were quite surprised to see 3 women sitting there. The 3 waiting ladies looked with raised eyebrow at the unknown woman and Tsunami practically felt herself getting smaller. Naruto quickly introduced them and the family went slack-jawed when he introduced his fiancées. After the introductions, they all made their way to Naruto's bedroom, shifted his bed to the side and teleported to the Uzushio ruins. Once there, the 3 new arrivals looked around in wonder. All 3 of them had heard of the place. Their island was right next door after all, but they would never have thought to actually see it up close, let alone build a new village there. Naruto quickly summoned a small stone platform so that they could look over the plans in detail. Naruto had decided to first build a few easy-to-remove houses for temporarily living arrangements. He informed the group of people that he had arranged with Gaara to send several laborers. It paid off to have friends. Tazuna inquired about a budget and started crying when he heard he could go crazy. Naruto had earned quite the amount of money by defeating Sasuke, Obito, Madara, Pain, Kakazu and Zetsu. Next to that he saved several countries and the cage with high rewards and an inheritance of his parents, Jiraiya and Kakashi. In short, he was loaded to the point he could be a feudal lord. He had covered the professionals needed by hiring them from neighboring villages and from Suna, and he covered the manpower by summoning a few hundred clones. All that was needed now was supplies, which he got partially covered by asking a favor from yet another person he had saved during the war. Yamato had been captured by Kabuto and used by Obito to strengthen the army of Zetsu clones by sticking the man into the Gedo Mizu. When the fighting with the demon statue had ended, it started to dissolve into tin light particles, all rising up into the air. If what Obito had said, the statue was going back to the moon. It was almost too late that Naruto saw Yamato in the statue and pure luck that he got the former team captain out before he too disappeared towards the moon. It had taken a month for the wood user to regain consciousness, but he had promised Naruto, like many others, to help him no matter what his request was. Of course, over the years Naruto had gained an understanding with the man. So he would make absolutely certain that Yamato wasn't going to overwork himself. He didn't save the man just so he could die of chakra exhaustion. 2 months into the building, the major planning finished and making good progress with the construction, Naruto took Tsunade down into the library. The older woman was nervous. The two of them would make the woman younger. If it wasn't Naruto, she probably would have smacked him through the entirety of the elemental nations, but she trusted him and his theory seemed plausible enough. One of the abilities of the Rinnegan was to grant life or death. Nagato had used this ability when Naruto had defeated him to restore the lives he had taken during his invasion of Konoha. There were 2 reasons, however, why Naruto's fate would not end up the same. First one was that Nagato had to resurrect hundreds upon hundreds of people. For that many people he had to use all of his own life force. Second one was that Nagato didn't meet the requirements for it to activate on its own, even if he had the bloodline. Instead it was implanted in him by Madara. His body breaking down and getting him into a wheelchair was a result of it. Naruto had awakened it on his own because he met the requirement of perfect body, spirit, chakra and knowledge. Tsunade believed all that and she saw the logic in it, but what made her nervous was, she wasn't dead, and even if she was, it didn't explain how she would get 30-something years back of her life. His explanation to that was simple as well, and sounded feasible, but was slightly dangerous. According to Naruto, from the moment a person is conceived, they are given a fixed amount of life force. That life force will burn and burn. The fire starts out small, but grows with the growth of the person, but after a certain age, the fire will steadily die down until the life force runs out. It was like starting a fire. Once you light a piece of wood, the flame will slowly spread and become larger, but at some point, it doesn't get larger but start to die down as the fuel runs out. The technique would normally reignite the remaining life force within a person, which would resurrect them. In this situation, however, he would add purified life force to hers, adding fuel in result, reversing what time had caused. She wouldn't have agreed if Naruto was going to sacrifice 30 years of his own life, but once again he had taken that into consideration. He wouldn't have to use his own life force. He had an immortal being made of chakra in him. Now she was somewhere where nobody was allowed to go without Naruto, so they would have privacy here, and he had sealed it off for sound. He didn't think it would hurt, but one does not have certainties with doing this for the first time. Tsunade lied down on the stone altar Naruto had summoned and undid her genjutsu as he requested. She had never before shown her true self without the genjutsu to anyone. She didn't count Sakura during the pain attack apparently. If this was going to work, then she was showing her fiancé how she was going to look like in 30 years. She was afraid to open her eyes. She was afraid to see disgust in his eyes, in the eyes of the boy she had come to adore as a brother, like as a young man, and was starting to love as a man. But it was something she had to face. She had to see his expression and was glad she did. He was smiling at her. Not patronizing, not condescending, and not grimacing. He was just smiling his usual warm, true smile at her. Now it wasn't just starting to love anymore, it was just love now. He gave her a quick kiss. Not a kiss a toddler gives his mother, but a loving kiss, their very first kiss at that, a real kiss on the lips. The two savored the moment for just that, the moment, before he said that he had no idea if it would hurt and that he would stop as soon as she gave the word. He told her that he would accept her no matter how she looked or how old she was. What kind of woman could turn away a man like that, a hero in shiny armor that was kind and accepting? She sure wasn't going to. Tsunade closed her eyes, waiting for something to happen. She wasn't sure what to prepare for. She felt a hand on her chest, right where her heart was, and felt warmth radiate from it. The warmth got warmer and warmer till it got hot and hotter until it was burning. The burning could almost cloud the rest of the sensations, the stretching of her skin, the burning on her scalp, the filling of her flesh, and the crunching of her joints. She didn't scream once. It really didn't hurt, but it was a discomfort that was so strong that it went past annoying to almost painful, but not quite yet. At some point it stopped, but she didn't open her eyes until Naruto gave the word. She opened her eyes and didn't want to see how the procedure turned out by simply looking at her hands. She looked over at Naruto and found him smiling. It seems that he was pleased with the result. She would just have to wait for a bit longer before she could find a full-length mirror before she could judge for herself. Naruto helped her stand up, though it wasn't necessary. She hadn't felt this light in years. Now she really couldn't wait for that mirror. Anko and Hinata were getting to know each other a little bit better under the perfect circumstances. They were at their fiancé's home drinking a nice red bean soup and eating a cinnamon bun and dango respectively. They found out quite quickly that while Tsunade and Naruto liked savory food, Hinata and Anko liked sweets. The two ladies were just exchanging some war stories and tales about what they had experienced with Naruto when they heard footsteps behind them. Naruto came walking in with a not-so-different-looking Tsunade. The four stared at each other. Before the loud mouth of the group, the female one asked if the technique worked or not. Tsunade was surprised by the question. She wanted to go to the bathroom first. It was the only place where she could find a mirror, but Naruto wouldn't allow her. He dragged her to her fellow fiancés. With simply one sentence, the two former younger women rushed to hug their now same-aged peer. She is not using her transformation technique. Neji had planned to have a simple training day. No Rock Lee or Might Guy or even his bride-to-be, just himself with some peaceful meditation and running through a few katas. His whole plan got shot to hell when he was summoned by Hiashi-sama. He didn't mind his uncle all that much since the conversation they had 7 years ago, when he lost to Naruto, but the man was still all about the clan and nothing else. While on missions, Neji preferred it to be business only, but he wished his uncle would simply take the time to simply have tea with him, even if only once. Being the dutiful man he was, he merely nodded at the servant that delivered the message and made his way to room overlooking the garden, where his uncle had his business meetings. When he arrived there, he had come upon a sight he did not soon expect to see, his uncle with 2 bottles of sake. He wondered if the spirits heard his thought from a mere moment ago and decided to add a little more, but looked with a curious look at his clan leader. The man in question was as stoic as ever, and even if the setting was supposed to be inviting, with the host sitting without emotion, you might as well have hot coals to sit on. That didn't mean that Neji kept standing. No, he took a seat and waited for whatever talk was about to happen to begin, but Hiashi-sama merely nodded and seemed to be waiting. After 3 minutes, what Neji thought was reasonable to wait for the person that requested to see you to speak, he heard people approaching. When he took a look behind him, he saw that both Hinata and Naruto were joining them. He looked at the reaction of his uncle and saw that the man had expected them. So this was what they were waiting for. Even though he had seen Naruto when he had come back a few months ago, he was still a bit surprised by the change the man had went through. No longer was he the loud-mouthed brat he was all those years prior. In front of him was a man that radiated serenity, wisdom and strength. He was not the only one that had changed though. Hinata seemed to be confident and she had lost her stutter. Ever since his lost battle with Naruto, he had begun to open up to the girl. Even though he had almost killed her during the preliminaries of the Chunin exam when they were but 12 and 13, she had not once stopped calling him Big Brother. The talk was amicable, but he was smart enough to know that there was a reason why they were all assembled. When all pleasantries were over and done with, 3 pair of eyes focused on the young Hyuga male. He felt slightly cornered at first, wondering what was going on. He had not seen Hiashi so relaxed ever, and though Neji thought it might have something to do with the barrier that surrounded them, it still seemed a bit off to him. As was expected of him, he gave his honest opinion to every question that was being asked of him. What did he find of the current state of the village? How were his missions going? How was it like being in charge of a group of people? Did he like the responsibilities? He didn't see any connection to any of these questions, but kept quiet about his own curiosity. It wasn't until Naruto made the barrier that they were in black and unable to see through that the young man was alert and went in a defensive stance. It only lasted a moment before Hiashi opened up his mouth and uttered the next sentence that he dropped that pose. Literally, his knees buckled and collapsed in sheer surprise. Neji, you will desert this village and prepare to attack Konoha and take over the Hyuga clan. If his all-seeing white eye wasn't able to see through genjutsu easily, he would have killed the imposter immediately. But even with his Byakugan activated, all he could see was his uncle, niece and one of the only people he respected in this village. So Neji just took another swig and asked his companions to repeat what they just said. His eyes might be great, but maybe his ears were acting up. He had wanted to process the order he had just received from his clan leader, but didn't get the chance to when the barrier lifted and Tenten together with her parents joined them. He was confused before, but it was getting worse by the second. The barrier was set once more, much to the alarm of Tenten and her family. They were reassured by Hiashi and Hinata that there wasn't anything to worry about. So now there were 4 highly confused people together with 3 people waiting for their guests to calm down. Neji composed first and waited patiently for an explanation. Tenten's father was next, followed by his wife and daughter. They all accepted a dish of sake, which were downed quite fast, before they returned their eyes to their previous target. The group of 4 was waiting for an explanation and it came from Naruto. He had a proposal for them. He wanted them to join his village. And all was quiet once more. Neji used the opportunity to process the words he hadn't gotten time to think about earlier and patiently waited for the rest of the story. When all of the people had calmed down somewhat, Naruto told them about his upcoming village. The 3 clanless, Tenten and her parents, were skeptical about it. Not unjustified. Her father might be from a long line of blacksmiths, but her mother was once a proud kunoichi of Konoha. The thought of leaving the village where she had been brought up was a huge pill to swallow. Neji was listening to every word that was exchanged between his mother-in-law and his friend. So far he hadn't heard a single word about him or what was mentioned earlier by his clan leader in the entire conversation. Tenten, father Kaiya gang and mother Kyoki gang, seemed susceptible of the idea. They, like many others, were not at all pleased with the current Hokage. The Hokage seemed to be spending more time with his military power than with the state of his village's welfare. The older couple had plenty of business, but the business that came was more preoccupied by the quantity that was demanded instead of the quality. In other words, the level of work that had to be performed was falling. As a blacksmith, it meant that his customers did not fully appreciate his work, and as a former kunoichi, it meant that something wasn't right amongst the shinobi ranks, if they were discarding the quality of their weapons. Even though the gang elders were tempted to open up a business in a new village, which might actually appreciate their work. Their daughter and their son-in-law were a different matter. Both had friends here and the thought of betraying them did not sit well. They may not have any love for the man that currently led their village. Neji almost died because of his betrayal, but they were shinobi of Konoha, no matter who sat on its throne. Hiashi, Naruto and Hinata had expected the 2 to react like that. Their loyalty to the village was one of their best aspects. So they had to carefully explain everything in detail. Most of the plan was directed at Neji, so he had the most to process. The plan involved him making a branch house in another village with the branch family members. The seal on their forehead would be removed and they would be given another seal that had only one function. Destroy the eyes upon death, to keep the Byakugan safe. The branch house in the new village would become the equivalent of the Konoha police force. Their eyes would be able to overlook the entire village to protect the villagers, and as sentries they would be responsible for the entry points to the village. Of course there would also be shinobi. Neji could teach his family some of the basics. After a few years, Neji would come back and take over the main house. Since the caged bird seal is removed, the main family cannot use it against him, and when he takes over he can remove the current council and abolish the oppression he and the rest of the branch house had to go through. Well, that explained the part about taking over the Hyuga clan. Now the attack on Konoha part. A topic that alarmed Tenten and her parents, who weren't present when it was first mentioned. Naruto told them that he was going to rebuild the Senju clan so they could take their rightful place. Of course, it would be at least 22 years before any offspring would be able to take over. So he would take the grandchild of the Sandaime with him to train. The boy would take over Konoha and begin its restoration until he was ready to retire and let the descendant of the founding father take over. The lineages of the two would appease the public, and with proper schooling and training they would be fit to become a leader. But it wasn't until Naruto said that he would do everything in his power to ensure the safety of the villagers and the lives of shinobi, that Neji, Tenten and her parents seemed to open up towards the idea. Tenten at this point was beginning to feel left out. Her parents had gotten a business opportunity, her soon-to-be husband had been given the offer of a lifetime, while she was the odd one out. Hinata seemed to pick up on the weapon wielder's mood and began to inform her what her role could be if she joined them. Tenten's expertise with weaponry would be invaluable in the teaching of the next generation. She would help Neji with the forming of a new branch of the Hyuga. The self-proclaimed weapons mistress felt a bit relieved at that. She wasn't one to just sit on the side and watch how others busy themselves in their duties. But it still felt a bit wrong to leave her village. Sure, her parents would join her and so would her fiancé, but would it be worth it? Her thoughts were interrupted by Neji, who wanted to know how he can guarantee the safety of everybody when taking over Konoha. I have the support of every clan leader in Konoha. Once I give the signal, the clans will fall back. That will cause a drop in morale, since the clans are the major source of strength of the shinobi force. I will only need to land one hit on an enemy to place a seal on a foe to paralyze them, so everybody I touch will be unable to get back up again without getting injured. And I alone will attack the village. The looks the blonde received were skeptical at best. How could one man defeat an entire village? They didn't have to think long before they realized who they were talking to. Uzumaki Naruto, demon container to the nine-tailed demon fox and hero of the war against the Akatsuki, and the man that defeated an opponent that single-handedly bested the 5 cages. It wasn't that far-fetched actually, to take over a village alone. The conversation stopped right after that and the people went their separate ways. This was not a decision to take lightly. Konohamaru was having a nice day, his big brother was back in town and they were going to have a nice bowl of ramen. It would be their last. The Ichirakus were moving out of the village and wanted to settle somewhere else. Konohamaru wasn't as big on ramen as his brother was, but he still liked it. After that, the two would train a little. The last Sarutobi hadn't fought Naruto in years, he was looking forward to the sparring match. The ramen was nice, but there seemed to be something going on with the owners of the restaurant and Naruto. Konohamaru just shrugged it off. The three of them always had a very good relationship. The meal was eaten with lots of questions from Naruto's part. About how life was going or how did he like being a ninja or how his quest to become Hokage was proceeding. The younger boy blushed a bright scarlet when Naruto asked if he and Moegi were together as a couple. It was a bit of payback from the blonde about the little event that occurred with Sakura right before they met Gaara for the first time. After paying for the meal and saying goodbye to Tsuki and Ayame, the two went to Training Ground 7. Naruto looked around a bit at first, relishing in the memories he had of this place with Kakashi in them. He didn't care about the other two that also were in those memories. Naruto took a good look at the young man in front of him and gave a small smile before he turned serious. Will you come with me to train, Konohamaru? Every bit of fighting spirit left the brown-haired boy immediately. He was practicing his imitation of a fish too seriously to think about fighting. Naruto in all that time had not softened his expression and kept waiting for the reply. Konohamaru couldn't believe it. He had asked the blonde ever since they met to help him train, but he never did. He taught him a few things when Ebisu was away or too busy with other duties, but never actually train. He didn't even have to think about it. The only reason it took so long to answer was because of his brain shutting down. As soon as he heard the answer being yelled, Naruto smiled at the boy again. Everything was falling into place. Now he would go to the Hyuga compound to see how the last part of his preparations was going. Konohamaru totally forgot about the spar they were supposed to have and walked with his soon-to-be teacher. He had no idea where they were going at that moment, but it didn't matter, all he had was questions. Would he learn more of those awesome jutsu like the Rasengan? Where would they be going? Were they going somewhere? How long would it take? Could he tell everyone about it, or was it a super secret? The brunette was a bit miffed when Naruto just kept saying, "You'll see," or, "You'll find out soon enough." The duo arrived at the Hyuga compound entrance. The young Sarutobi had absolutely no clue about why they were here. Naruto seemed to anticipate something, so Konohamaru just kept silent. It didn't take long before Hyuga Neji stepped out of the door and greeted the two. The younger one of the three was curious why the Hyuga asked if he accepted. What did the raven-haired man have to do with his training? Things were getting suspicious for the boy when the Hyuga said that they accepted as well. Then Naruto handed the other man a scroll and said that he had to give it to his mother and father-in-law and they should go to Wave and show it on the docks. Everything would then be taken care of. Neji was told he had to come to Naruto's house when he and Tenten were ready and then they would go. The two men agreed and separated, with Naruto leading on to the next location. The entire walk, Konohamaru was silent. The whole short conversation that his brother just had was disturbing him. He couldn't place his finger on it, but somewhere there was trouble, he just knew it. But what? What's going on, boss? Naruto turned on the spot and simply looked at the boy. They were only 4 years apart in age, but he could see that, thankfully, the grandson of the Sandaime hadn't seen the horrors of war and had stayed relatively innocent. He was extremely grateful for that. The blonde thought it over for a moment, before asking something in return. Do you trust me? The boy nodded. Have I ever done anything that you think is questionable? The boy shook his head. Can you wait some more then, before I explain? The boy didn't nod right away, but he did eventually. Uchiha Sasuke was getting more annoyed by the moment. First Senju Tsunade and her apprentice Kato Shizune left the village. He couldn't stop them because a Sennin is allowed to move freely if they wish to and can take their chosen apprentice with them as they please. So now his health care department missed their 2 best doctors and his own wife was left without tutoring. A few deserters here and there, but that is nothing unusual, desertion happens everywhere. It really did. Besides that, the council was pressuring him to start with the building of his clan. He had been married for a month now and he was tired of explaining how baby making worked, since the old bastards of the council seemed to be forgetting that it takes 9 months before a baby pops out. His wife didn't like to be referred to as a baby factory, so she had been quite the nag about it. He thanked everything he knew of for the paperwork that his job supplied. He was looking over another missing nin report, another one from the Hyuga he noted, when the door burst open and the number 1 knucklehead of the village came in. Sasuke was surprised to see that he wasn't alone. With him was the heir of the Sarutobi clan. Well, survivor was more like it. Naruto informed him that he had chosen Konohamaru as his disciple and that the boy would be accompanying him on a training trip around the world. Sasuke refused immediately. He was not going to allow one of his shinobi to go off for who knew how long to train. Naruto never lost his composure and simply told the Uchiha that as a Sennin he was allowed to go where he wanted and that he had the right to choose a disciple to take with him. He didn't even need permission from the Hokage, but he wanted to be polite to the leader of the village. Sasuke was visibly seething with rage, but he knew the rules and he knew that the dope had indeed every right. The duo just left the extremely annoyed man, opting to go get Konohamaru all packed and ready. He had to say goodbye to a few people. Naruto told Konohamaru to say goodbye to his little girlfriend Moegi. Gaara was standing on the prow of a ship, silently admiring the progress that had been made to Naruto's village. His siblings came up behind him, also admiring the structure above a whirlpool. They all knew who came up with it, but they would praise him all the same when they would meet up. On top of 6 pillars, which were standing in the outer rings of the whirlpool, was a wooden house, as wide as the whirlpool itself was. No one would ever find out how the structure was built, but it was a marvel to see something being built on top of something that could easily swallow the biggest ship known to man. In the little house there seemed to be guards sitting and were shouting at the captain of the cruiser Gara with his entourage were traveling on. The whirlpool seemed to slow down before the vortex of water completely disappeared. Every guest on the ship watched in amazement as the water stilled. Others were more preoccupied by what was up ahead. The boat passed through the pillars underneath the guardhouse. There was one berth ahead of them after some more sailing to give incoming vessels enough room to maneuver. The berth was connected to one large wharf that had two other berths. Another guard post a ways from each pier. The berths seemed to be for the bigger passenger vessels as three other ships were already on them, while smaller ships and boats, probably for fishing, were secured directly to the wharf, unloading their haul of the day. The ship docked without further issues and the passengers landed a bit unsteadily. Traveling by sea was not done often by the people of Suna, so some of them were either sick or wobbly. Gara seemed to have none of these problems and waited patiently for his siblings and his guards. His guards were instantly around him when they were approached by a young man. The young man was a little bit surprised by the sudden movement, but relaxed his stance when he noticed it wasn't necessarily directed at him. The man was wearing navy blue cargo pants on top of simple slippers, a sleeveless black shirt, and his long black hair was held back with a forehead protector with a swirl engraved in it. The man bowed formally and announced that he was there to guide Cage through the gates and handle the paperwork when they would be cleared. So the Suna group followed their guide. Never having been there before, they all looked around in wonder as they saw people bustling about, shouting about ropes and securing this or that. This place was supposed to be new, but it was overflowing with life. The group passed by several warehouses on each side of the road before they came upon a large gate, which reminded them a bit of the gates of Konoha, probably because of the wall around it that surrounded the harbor and ended slightly in the sea. Every arrival had to get processed here. It was a great security measure. They passed the gate easily enough and proceeded to enter the village. As soon as they did, they entered a small park. It was only a few yards, but on the left side of the road stood a memorial. Gara had been told of the remains that Naruto found when he first came here. He also said that he had buried them somewhere. He didn't think that the blonde would actually go as far as make a memorial for them. He looked over to see what it said. To those who came before me in seasons long ago. To those who are the loved ones that I will never know. To those whose noble names I bear, whose light within me burns. To those whose lives of courage prepared the way for me. Whose works became my heritage, whose harvest I may reap. Who left for me a legacy that I have yet to earn. To them in gratitude shall my heart be turned. Shin Uzushiogakur will always remember those that have fallen. Whether in past or future, our comrades will be honored. Gara smiled a little at the text. It was probably more than the lost souls would have asked for, but there was nobody that could object to the sentiment. Everybody would pass it, they would see the monument and would at least think about those that came before. Isn't that what life was about? To do something that will make people remember you. From there on it was obvious that the building was nowhere near finished. Every meter they walked they could see construction sites, workers and supplies. True, there were some shops open selling groceries, and yes, there seemed to be some finished houses, but most of it was still work in progress. Eventually the Suna group arrived at the city square. In the middle of it was a large round building with the symbol of the village on it. It didn't need to be guessed that this was the office of the village leader and public service. The square led to 5 different roads, one of which they came from. Between every road there stood a building facing the center. A gasp informed the group to look somewhere else, and Kankuro was pointing at a building that was sand-colored, 3 stories high and had the symbol of Suna above the entrance. Gara felt his eyebrow lift in curiosity, but he would have to wait to ask what the deal behind it was. When he looked around some more, he noticed that next to the building with Suna, on the other side of the road, the same kind of structure, only yellow with the symbol of Kumo on it. He turned around and as he expected, there was the same building, just lightly brown with Iwa on it, and next to that light blue with Kiri. Now he had a pretty good idea what was going on. but would ask later to be certain. The guide had given them the time to look at the center of their village, but after a moment or two, or four, he gathered his charges and continued their walk. The group had expected to go to the center building, but they walked past it and also past the reddish building with Konoha's mark on it and continued down on of the main streets. There seemed to be more completed building on this side, or well enough to start using it. Like a school, a blacksmith, an orphanage and a clinic. The street ended and they were standing in front of a large compound. The walls seemed to go on and on without end to the left side, but only went on for a yard or two before going around the corner on the right. Next to it stood another compound, slightly smaller, but still quite large on its own. The front gates of the gate in front of them were of a massive oak and were big enough to fit an elephant. On the door there were 3 symbols positioned in a triangle. On top it was a purple Uzumaki clan sign of a swirl. Below it on the left side was the well-known green Senju symbol of one fine horizontal line that opened up in 2 incomplete circles near both ends, and to its right was a blue symbol nobody had seen before. It was a circle with 3 waves on the bottom half and 3 waving stripes above it. The guide knocked and loud yelling could be heard from the other side. The large door opened and revealed a purple-haired woman in a mesh suit underneath a red bustier and a brown mini-skirt. Gaara and his siblings recognized the woman as the proctor of the Chunin exam where they met Naruto. She was a bit loud, but she thanked the man that brought the group here and took them inside. The visitors walked through a small front yard that had a sand garden on both sides. Gaara stopped for just a brief second, to which Anko stopped to look what the holdup was and saw that her guest was shifting the sand of Naruto's garden. Instead of the carefully lined streaks and swirls, the surface was now completely smooth and sported the symbol of Suna. Kankuro had to hold his laughter when they entered the building. Once inside they noticed that they were probably the last ones to arrive, which wasn't all that strange since they had the longest distance to travel. They were surprised when they saw that the former bodyguard of the Tsuchikage was now the Yondaime of Iwa. Apparently old Unoki had passed away a few months ago. Still, what the people that had met Akatsuchi knew of the rotund man was that he was a patient and kind man that knew when there was a time for action and a time for peace. Next to him sat the Sandame's granddaughter, which seemed to be laughing quite loud at something. Naruto was sitting comfortably with a brown-haired boy, Hyuga Neji, and his girl Tenten, who seemed to be a bit wary of Tamari, Hyuga Hinata, Lady Tsunade with Shizune, and was joined by Mitarashi Anko. The Mizukage was here together with Chojuro. Aoi was left behind to do the paperwork in her stead. The Raikage with his little brother B and Darui, Mabui, Samui, Atsui, Karui and Omoi. Gaara was slightly thankful that he wasn't the only one with a large group. He had his fiancée Matsuri with him, his sister Tamari, his brother Kankuro with his wife Shosuna and Baki. Kankuro seemed to gasp when he saw the brown-haired lad sitting next to Naruto, but Gaara had difficulties recognizing the boy. The young man stood up together with Naruto and walked over to the new arrivals. Konohamaru went straight to Kankuro and greeted him. The two stood awkward for one moment before the first few chuckles sounded and laughter soon followed. As soon as Kankuro said that the boy certainly wasn't a brat anymore, Gaara remembered. It was the grandson of the Sandame Hokage that Kankuro almost abused just before the Chunin exams. Greetings were exchanged between everybody and things got lively soon. Of course there were tons of questions that Naruto and his brides had to answer. None were too serious and every answer seemed to turn into a story on its own. How did you get so many villagers? You have been building for how long now? 4 months. Well, I went to the feudal lord of hot water, to try and get him to send his shinobi requests to me instead of Konoha. Along the way I took Konohamaru with me to see the world and train him. We came through several villages that were being terrorized by bandits. Every time the feudal lord hired Konoha to get rid of them, a new group showed up. They had no food or money because of the constant raids, so after freeing the imprisoned villagers I offered them a place to stay. I even went to several orphanages and took all the children with me, so they could either train to become shinobi or learn a trade of their own choice after they finish their basic education. The building started 6 months ago and has been going without too much trouble. Thanks to my funds, and my endless supply of chakra, the workforce is constant, and with the experts I hired everything is going according to plan. How is your shinobi force coming along? It was a bit of a slow start and it still isn't anything near good enough for this village to become a ninja village, but I posted special posters everywhere I went. Those posters are sealed and can only be viewed by descendants of the Uzumaki clan who pour their chakra in it. Till now no actual relative has shown up, but descendants from former shinobi of Uzushio recognized the symbol of the village and came here to see if there was something going on. What have you completed so far? Mine and the Hyuga branch compound are complete, as is my and the public service office. The harbor was the first thing that needed to get finished, so there's that. We're almost finished with the hospital. Luckily there have only been minor accidents during the construction. The basic school is coming along nicely, together with the Ninja Academy. Then there are still houses and stores that are done, but not yet perfected. What do you mean basic school? I have decided that I will give a basic education to the children before they advance to the Shinobi Academy. In Konoha, every child went to the academy to learn math and reading and whatever. Here, you will get that at basic school that will start from age 5 till 9. After that a choice can be made. Try to become a shinobi or pursue another career. That way, the children will be filtered and the Ninja Academy can focus on actual shinobi-related education. What were those buildings surrounding your office? Well those are to be embassies. I made one for every great nation. It is complete with office and living arrangements so that you can send a dignitary here. We have all fought and bled together and I wanted to make sure that we remain allies. By giving each of your villages their own office here, I can discuss matters with your representative instead of traveling the lands to meet you or the other way around. And, if one of your shinobi is in trouble, in need of guidance or just wants to have a quick rest on their journey home, they can visit their nation's office, and stay there instead of finding a hotel, which I don't have yet by the way. Even Konoha. Yes, even Konoha, eventually. Did you tell everybody what you did to the Uchiha? Now that you mention it, I only told you and your brother. Well, I was reading a book about the history of Kiri. We all know about the tyrant Yagura that instigated the bloodline purge. It appears that he was not the first one that had that idea. There was a man who designed a seal that would cut off the reproducing capabilities of people, to stop the continuation of the once feared bloodlines. The Shadaime Mizukage did not approve and destroyed the man's research. But it gave me an idea, so I adjusted an existing seal to have the same function. In other words, the Uchiha clan will end with Sasuke. There was a heavy silence for a while. The Uchiha were revered warriors for generations. They had all witnessed the strength of their two strongest. Sasuke was not loved by anyone in the room because of his crimes, but to castrate him without him knowing it seemed a bit cruel. Then again, as soon as the visitors from Kumo started laughing out loud, the mood lifted. Food was served and sake kept flowing and the gathering lasted well into the evening. At some point Naruto stood up with his group. I'm thankful that you came and happy to see you all in good health, but it is getting late and I suggest we get some sleep. My wedding will start early tomorrow and I need my beauty sleep. The very next day, the few villagers and all the guests were gathered at the center of Shin Uzushio. All of the foreign guests were dressed up, the cages in their formal robes, the women in colorfully embroidered kimonos and the men in black hakimas. The 4 cages stood in front of the building facing the crowd. They would perform the ceremony, albeit different than normal. Since a temple was not yet built and no priest was in the village, the traditional wedding, a priest conducting it with sake being exchanged between the families, would be altered. Instead of the priest, there were the leaders of the 4 largest nations that would watch over their oaths, and since Anko, Tsunade and Naruto had no family, the vows would be spoken between each other instead of directed at the respective families. The mutterings of the people were all hushed as 3 ladies in pure white kimonos were accompanied by 3 Narutos in black hakimas. Each Naruto had a different clan emblem on his chest and back embroidered in gold. The one on the left had the symbol of the Senju on his back, the one in the middle of the Uzumaki and the one on the right the strange one that nobody recognized. The people parted to let the three couples through and shuffled back into place as the brides and grooms took their place in front of the cages. Seeing as Gaara was a bit too stoic, too loud and Akatsuchi too mellow, Terumi May stepped forward to lead the ceremony. To all those gathered here today, we thank you for bearing witness to the unification of these four individuals. Seeing as the circumstances are a bit different than normal, nobody could stop the laughter that followed. How could they? Here stood one man times three marrying three women at the same time, but every woman will have a different clan name. Let us proceed one at a time. Do you, Senju Tsunade, take Naruto as your husband? I do. And do you, Naruto, take Senju Tsunade as your wife? I do. Do you, Mitarashi Anko, take Uzumaki Naruto as your husband? I do. Do you, Uzumaki Naruto, take Mitarashi Anko as your wife? I do. Do you, Hyuga Hinata, take Namikaze Naruto as your husband? So the strange symbol was of the Namikaze clan. I do. Do you, Namikaze Naruto, take Hyuga Hinata as your wife? I do. Then witnessed by four of the five great nations, I present Uzumaki Namikaze Senju Naruto, with his wives Senju Tsunade, Uzumaki Anko and Namikaze Hinata. Now let the festivities begin. There was quite some laughter about the highly unusual wedding. With the gifts that the foreigners had brought and the supplies the village had gathered specifically for this day, the feast started at noon and ended only when the first 10 people passed out from alcohol. There would be no work today and tomorrow, so everybody could cut loose. There were drinking games for the adults, magic, tricks for the children. People of all classes mingled and danced. All in all, everybody had a great time. The compound that housed the now three clans was empty save for Naruto and his ladies. His guests would stay the rest of their visit in their respective embassies. There weren't enough rooms for everybody to have privacy, but seeing as there were some couples among them, sharing a room wasn't a real big problem. Naruto needed his privacy that night, and the rest of the week. The start of his clans was about to begin. Thank the spirits for his endless stamina. 7 months after the wedding, the village that was in complete ruins a mere 11 months ago was bustling with life. Fishmongers with every variety shouting to attract attention, shinobi coming and going from intermissions, children laughing and playing, the hospital was receiving patients that never could have treatment before they came to the village. And it was all thanks to the Uzukage. Said man was sitting at his favorite restaurant in the whole world. Ichiraku Ramen. It had taken quite the persuasion skills to get Chuki to move his establishment to a new location. Especially since business was good in a stable village. But seeing as Naruto was their best customer and they honestly liked the boy as if he were family, they decided to take the risk. And they were thankful every day that they had taken the offer. The little bar that they had was gone and in its stead was a full restaurant. The children of the village were treated often enough by Naruto, and since Uzukage-sama ate there, people literally flocked the place. They were even thinking of hiring people when 3 children expressed their wish to become a ramen chef. This of course made the old man chuckle, but when his daughter Ayame adopted the 2 boys and girl that made the statement, the old man saw that he might have created a nice inheritance to his baby girl and his new grandchildren. Neji Hyuga was also a pleased man. After marrying Tenten and with their firstborn underway, his clan was making great progress. Most of the branch members still had trouble adjusting when the caged bird seal was removed and accepting the new bloodline safeguard. But the first security members had showed to both their clan and the village that they were appreciated and needed. They had stopped several infiltrators coming into the city and even stopped a few crimes from happening. Nothing major of course, a few brawls and a shoplifter, but still it was more effective than the Uchiha ever was in Konoha. They were even given special training in ranged weapons from Tenten, seeing as the Hyuga only dealt with close-range combat normally and this would give them an advantage. Sarutobi Konohamaru had taken less time than anybody expected to come to terms with Naruto's plan. He had taken residence in the Konoha embassy. When Naruto asked the lad to just stay with him in his home, the boy said that he wanted to know where his future subordinate would be living at, and that the noises from his big brother's bedroom made sleeping a bit troublesome. His training was proceeding well. Naruto had rummaged in his library for some scrolls to let the Sarutobi copy. When pain attacked Konoha, the Sarutobi manor was wiped away, taking away all the family treasures and styles. Hiruzen was a renowned bow staff fighter with his own style. Asuma was an expert with short blades, with a preference to his trench knives. Then there was the ape summoning contract of their family and some family fire jutsu. Of course, there was no way to duplicate the original styles of his uncle and grandfather or the family's own fire techniques, but Naruto could give him new ones. The ape summoning contract was no problem, because of the blonde's animal path abilities, and Enma was glad to see that even though with unconventional methods, he could remain by his dear friend's family's side. The gang couple was the proud owner of a beautiful forge. When the couple started their store in Konoha, they had to be considerate with the amount of space there was available in the neighbors when working. Naruto gave them directions to the two head contractors. Inari and his grandfather Tazuna were allowed to pick a spot wherever they want and design it however they liked. Now they had the dream of every blacksmith in the world, plenty of space to work and display, perfect sound isolation so they can work whenever they want, and a simple request form for when they needed supplies to complete the order that Naruto made. And that was the best part. He wanted to supply an army with weapons but would only allow the very best in quality. Blacksmith paradise indeed. The embassies were occupied by their respective nations. While Suna had sent a permanent dignitary to become the ambassador of Suna, the other nations had decided that they would keep rotating it. In Kumo's case it was Samui 1/3 of the year, her brother Atsui the second third, and Darui or Karui for the third part. Naruto didn't know the people that Iwa and Kiri had sent. They met and they were polite. He could try and loosen them up later. Tazuna's family was doing great as well. The family had designed a larger than average house for themselves near the outskirts of the city, as close to the harbor as possible. The two men were still busy with plans and ideas. There were still some construction sites in the village. Tsunami had met a nice man with which she seemed to be getting along with. Naruto had already warned the man for any transgressions, but the lady herself had already mentioned to her suitor that she wanted to take it slow. Naruto stopped recalling everything that had transpired over the last few months and downed his last bowl. He had something big to do in a few minutes and he needed all the energy he could get. If this went wrong in any way, it would kill not only him but his wives as well. So Naruto paid for his meal, waved goodbye to the larger Ichiraku family and made his way to the other side of the island. He needed to be as far away from the village as possible. My only family. My, Ji-chan. I do not wish to destroy the village, I wish to take over without casualties and reform the current corruption that allowed a traitor and an S-ranked criminal to become its leader. The Hokages processed the words and two of them consulted with their wives. Hashirama was the one that stepped forward this time and looked straight into the blonde's eyes. I hereby give you permission to restore my dream, to weed out the corrupt and tainted. The others nodded and gave their blessing as well. Thank you, Shadaime-sama. If I may, I wish to make one more request of you. The man turned a question gaze at the lad and told him to proceed. None of your descendants have ever inherited your bloodline limit. It is still the most sought-after power in the world. Despite that, I wish to pass it on to the Senju clan heir, to prove his heritage. How do you plan to do that? Careful research has led me to findings that I can use. Special seals and techniques can let me merge your chakra, instead of your DNA, with a newborn child since their chakra network is not yet developed and working. Similar to how a newborn child was able to house the Kyuubi no Yuko. All I would need from you is to force your chakra into this scroll, which is filled with seals to be able to take in your spiritual energy signature and your physical energy blueprint. When my children are born and the data is merged with them, it will not cause any alterations in the child's physique or mind, but will grant them your abilities. How can you be sure of that? I doubt my granddaughter would like it if you made a clone out of me. I have stolen the research of a mad scientist that tried to discover a way to steal bloodlines, compared it with studies that have been made in the past, and when I was 100% certain it would work, I asked for 2 volunteers, one with a bloodline limit and one without. I succeeded in the experiment, but since the non-bloodline carrier's chakra system was too developed, the newly gained abilities were present but not to full capacity of its original wielder. Sarutobi had been standing quietly, listening to the former loudmouthed knucklehead talk. He simply couldn't believe the level of talk that he was hearing from the young lad. Before, the boy didn't want to read even if it was a jutsu scroll, but now he was reading about bloodline limit transfer research and a higher level of fuinjutsu that he himself knew of. What on earth happened after he had died to cause all of this? Very well. Just pour chakra into this scroll. And the founding father of Konoha did just as he was requested. He was dead now, so it wasn't like he needed it. He was already thankful that his granddaughter, who should be nearing the end of her life, had been given a second chance to start a family. And if he could contribute to it with just a little usage of his chakra, then he would do it gladly. No sooner had Hashirama given the scroll back to Naruto, did the death god appear. They all wanted more time. But life was rarely fair, so they said their goodbyes as quickly as possible. Konohamaru couldn't stop the tears when he heard his grandfather say that he should have a happy life and take his time to reach his goals. To enjoy life as much as he can. Tsunade felt a few tears herself when she saw her mentor, her uncle and grandparents just smile at her. And Kushina and Minato, who just simply looked proud at Naruto, for all that he has accomplished in this world. They waved at him and told him to take his time, that they would patiently wait for him to spend time together. When they were all gone, Shinigami just told Naruto to summon him once more to complete his end of the deal. With that, Cerberus walked back behind the closing door, disappearing behind something that shouldn't be able to cover him, and the skeleton-invested gate sunk back into the ground. Naruto turned towards his wives and his student and smiled. He had the last piece of the puzzle. The only thing left to do was finish Konohamaru's training to complete his mission. He was close now. It had been 4 years since the meeting with the previous Hokages. Sarutobi Konohamaru stood next to Hyuga Neji, Hyuga Tenten, Namikaze Hinata, and his big brother Naruto. They were all wearing their battle garbs. Konohamaru was wearing a dark brown shirt over a mesh top, black cargo pants, and his leaf forehead protector on his head. He had shin and lower arm guards that matched the breech plate especially made for him. The set had special seals from Naruto himself. The armor was a present that could maybe become a family heirloom. Neji had a white hakama with a lavender plate that only covered where his heart was. Tenten wore no armor, she simply had 3 large scrolls on her back. The couple had the leaf headband on their right bicep and the Shin Uzushio headband on their left bicep. Hinata was mostly out of the field nowadays, preferring to tend to her 2 children instead of going out to do missions. But for this occasion, she pulled out her old clothes, thought they needed to be resized a bit, it had been a while since she wore them. Her dark blue skin-tight pants with lilac jacket over her mesh shirt made it look like the past 6 years never happened. Her Shin Uzushio headband hanging proudly around her neck. Naruto was not wearing any armor either. He said he didn't need it and didn't like it. He wore his black kimono with the golden embroidery of strength and wisdom on his sleeves. He had added an old saying from Sandaime Hokage in gold to his back. There is power in knowledge. Naruto would never have the chance to tell the old man how right he was. With the triangular hat symbolizing his status as a kage with the mark of Shin Uzushio on both his hat and his black and white kage robes. The group of 5 looked at each other. This was their last mission together. Neji, Tenten, Hinata and Konohamaru all did a henge, giving them alternate appearances, while Naruto summoned 300 shadow clones and made the clones henge as well. If Naruto's face could be seen through the veil of his hat, he would have been the only one recognizable. Let's go. With that order, the army of Shin Uzushio crossed the border into the land of fire. 25-year-old Uchiha Sasuke was not happy. He was not happy at all. It would be better to say that he was seething, furious, pissed beyond measure. The past 4 years have been one disappointment after another. He was Hokage now, but he had several merchants leave his city, multiple shinobi deserting to a new village. He had lost alliances with all of the great nations, the smaller nations, and some steady suppliers of missions. And all of it went to the new village that appeared 4 years ago. If it wasn't for the steady supply of work from the Fire's feudal lord, he would have been bankrupt. He didn't need the military alliances really. Konoha had the strongest military force in the world. And with him as leader, with his fully evolved Mangekyo Sharingan, only a fool would attack his city. He had a self-sustaining village, so he was not dependent of other places to feed his people. But the people were getting restless because of the lack of luxury they were used to. His biggest problem though, even after being married for 4.5 years with his former teammate and the woman he stole from the dope, he still had not sired a child. He had her checked to see if she wasn't barren, an act that had her screaming and flailing for a good few weeks. It couldn't be him that had faulty equipment. He was an Uchiha, they were made for expanding their clan and bloodline, they were perfect. So he would just have to keep on trying. If only he wasn't honor-bound to have only one woman, but he would not discard his family's traditions. He still had time to make children, he was still young. Sasuke was snapped out of his musing when a Chunin stormed into his office. Hokage-sama, we have an incoming army led by the Uzukage. They are 300 men strong and will arrive within half a day. What are your orders? The Uchiha smirked, the perfect way to vent some frustration. Start evacuating the civilians, alert every shinobi to man the walls and gather around the front gates. Did they have any siege weapons? The Chunin shook his head. Then the only way for them to effectively enter the city is the front gates, since the walls have auto chakra seals on them. Also, send a message to Suna that we might need backup. Nobody has faced the new village's shinobi before. The Chunin bowed and left to relay the orders. Sasuke smirked. What fools are they to attack an Uchiha? Nara Shikaku, Aburame Shibi, Inazuka Sume, Yamanaka Inoichi and Akamichi Shuza all knew that this day would come. They had all given orders to their respective clan members that as soon as the order was given they were to retreat to their clan base. Some of the younger members were not fond of this decision, but followed the order of their clan leaders. Hyuga Hiyashi, however, ordered his clan to not move out at all. He had another reason for anticipating this day. This day would lift the curse of the Hyuga clan and fulfill his lifelong ambition. He had to get the council of elders in the same room, but that was easy. Those old fools would always take the most inappropriate time to have a meeting about the future of the clan. Even if the very village they lived in was under attack. They had done so with the sand invasion and the pain invasion. Why would this be any different? All he had to do now was to wait for 3 of the invaders to come and stage the coup. When the army arrived, all of the shinobi forces were gathered and standing in defensive positions around the main gate. The troops witnessed how the people manning the wall got pulled over the edge and screamed in pain without any sighting of a rope or weapon being used. It was safe to say that every ninja was on high alert. Most of them were fresh, since the Fourth War had claimed many lives. It was thankful that many of the veterans were still alive, the clan leaders and several of the Anbu. If not for the presence of the latter under command of Morino Ibiki, many might have fled in fear. As soon as the last sentry on the wall vanished, the doors to Konoha were blown up, leaving only splinters and a large cloud of dust in its wake. Out of the dust walked a Kage with a few dozen of his men. They drew the attention to a point where nobody noticed 3 figures slipping by under the cover of the dust cloud. Nobody attacked yet. It never happened for a leader of the army to stand in front of their army, especially in the line of sight for long-range attacks. The dust settled, showing that where there were once 300 warriors, now only 20 remained. One overly nervous, fresh Chunin got trigger happy and shot a fireball at the enemy leader. To everyone's amazement, without any sign or movement, a wall of water erected just in front of the concealed man, absorbing the technique as if it was water being sucked into a sponge. You never were a real good leader, bastard. As the sentence was said, Naruto removed his hat and robes, leaving him in only his kimono. All of the people gasped when they saw him, the hero of the war. But why was he attacking the village? He was a shinobi of the leaf, right? He wanted to become Hokage, right? Why the hell was he wearing cage robes from Shin Uzushio? It's you. Dope. You know that only a cage is allowed to wear those robes, and if you think you can take over Konoha to take over my position, you are even more of an idiot than I thought. Sasuke smirked at his old teammate. He wanted to pour more salts into the blonde's wounds, let him feel the pain of humiliation. The Uchiha had to go through it when the dead last of Konoha had with defeated him pure luck before bringing him back here. He clearly didn't know the expression, what goes around, comes around. How is the village doing, bastard? Got any allies? Oh, wait, I have them. Any trading partners? No, wait, got those too. Any steady suppliers outside of the feudal lord? Damn, I got those too. Sasuke was seething. Naruto was the Uzukage. When the hell did that happen? So what? You started a little village. With the might of Konoha under my command, you and your village will be squashed like the dead last you are. Under your command Konoha is mighty. Because you're an Uchiha, the Uchiha is down to one last weak member, the Uchiha are extinct, so I don't need to worry about that. You just wait until I get my clan restored, then we will see who's extinct. Not gonna happen. Why is that? Dope. Because you will die today and you don't have children. How do you know about that? I sterilized you. With those 3 words, all the color drained from the young man's face. The shinobi looked in disbelief at either their leader or the invader. Sakura was standing in the crowd and was making her way with impressive speed towards Naruto and lashed out at him with the enhanced strength taijutsu she had learned from Tsunade before she left. All watched in amazement as the pink-haired girl seemed to simply be suspended in the air, not moving a muscle before Naruto grabbed her larger than normal forehead, slammed her into the ground, and seemed to place a seal on her. The shinobi immediately launched a volley of shuriken and kunai at the aggressor, seemingly forgetting about the pink kunoichi that lay at the man's feet. He simply turned around and once more disappeared behind a dome, of earth this time, without moving an inch, deflecting all of the incoming projectiles. Not even exploding tags attached to the weapons seemed to even dent the cover. As soon as the last cling of metal hitting stone was heard, the dome withdrew back into the ground and displayed an unmoved Naruto, but no Sakura. Where did you take Sakura-sama? Shouted a genin. She will be used in my experiments, just like the rest of you. Naruto said with a malicious grin. He wouldn't do it, of course. He just placed his whore of an X outside the wall, constricted by a forced sleep seal, so she would neither rejoin the battle and wouldn't be in harm's way. She was sleeping nicely with the few dozen leaf shinobi that had the misfortune of guarding the wall. But he wanted to anger them, rile them up. The men behind Naruto all dropped their henge, Konohamaru standing guard at the prisoners in case any woke up or if someone found them and would try to release them. Once more the leaf shinobi were shocked. They weren't fighting an army of 200, they were fighting one man with clones. They were not as afraid now as they were earlier. Hero or not, he was outnumbered 400 to 1. Naruto whistled once and suddenly the troopers noticed people retreating. Sasuke looked up bewildered, wondering where the hell his soldiers were going off to while they were under attack. The Uchiha looked back at Naruto and saw him smirking. The blonde bastard had people on the inside. He would deal with them after finished the dead last. The dead last made one hand seal, the one he was famous for, and shouted the name of his technique. Once more 200 clones faced the Konoha forces. Every clone took out a 3-pronged kunai with a yellow label on the hilt, only a few of the oldest shinobi recognized it. Once all of them had the blade out, they threw it in every direction, much to the fear of those who recognized it. They prayed they were mistaken, otherwise, this would be a massacre. The real Naruto took one step forward, lifted his hand towards all of his foes and smiled at them warmly, before his eyes turned cold. Shinra Tensei. The people gasped in horror when they heard the name of the attack that once made a giant crater of the village and closed their eyes in fear when they all felt themselves being thrown back. The attack that was yelled next was only known by the older generation and knew it as soon as they heard it, they were royally screwed. Hiraishin. X. Sasuke could merely watch as he saw his men being taken out by the dozen. Not 2 at a time, not 5 at a time, no, 10-12 every few seconds. He tried to keep up with the movement that the blonde used to be everywhere and nowhere at once. He had tried to take out a clone or two, but even with his fully evolved Sharingan, he wasn't fast enough. He had to listen to the screams of his men falling like bushes in pain and see the looks of fear on their faces before they went still. Was this really the dope? This couldn't be right, only an Uchiha was supposed to have this much power. The one-sided battle lasted a mere 30 minutes. In that short amount of time, Konoha was defeated, by one man. It was humiliating. The only ones still standing were the Rokudaime Hokage and the Shidaime Uzukage. Truth be told, Sasuke was scared, just a little bit, but still scared. And when he blinked once, just to moisten his eyes, Naruto was behind him and all went black. X. Mortal, have you prepared the stipend? Homura, Koharu and Sasuke felt their eyes widen in fear when Naruto motioned to them. As a sign of gratitude I have decided to give you 1 extra soul Shinigami-sama. The apparition looked at his payment, before taking out his dagger. With one hand he grabbed onto Sasuke's head, clutched and started pulling back. A bluish form started to come out of the young man until it revealed Sasuke in spirit form, his very soul. When all that remained between the body and the spirit was a small sliver, the god of death merely cut of the link between the two and ate the soul under the eye of all. He repeated this process twice, with the 2 former advisors of 3 Hokages and the 3 bodies went limp. The deal is fulfilled. The door closed and Cerberus walked back behind the door as the gateway started to sink back into the earth, leaving not a trace behind of his presence. Naruto stood, with the leaders of Konoha's clans doing the same, a bit wary of the blonde, and listened to their temporary leader as he spoke. I call a meeting of the current council members of Konoha. X. Nara Shikaku sat in his seat at the long table that was used for every meeting. He had brought his son Shikamaru with him, as he was going to be here in his stead in the near future and needed more experience in the dealings of politics. He looked to his left and saw that the other clans had done the same. Yamanaka Inoichi was here with his daughter Ino, who was frightened to be here, Abarame Shibi with his stoic as ever son Shino, Akamichi Shuza with his even now chips-eating son Choji, Inazuka Sume with her son Kiba and more surprisingly, Hyuga Neji with Hiashi behind him. The last one got the most looks as for 1, Hanabi was supposed to be clan heir, 2, Neji was a deserter, and 3, Neji was sitting at the table and Hiashi was standing behind him. On the other side of the room sat 5 of the civilian members, seeing as the other 2 shinobi in name but civilians at heart council members were now gone. Ogun Shoji was the head of the catering sector, Hanabusa Ichiru was the representative of the upper class of the people, Midori Shiori was the representative of the middle class, Magami Kaoru for the lower class and Genkin Yoku for the merchants of the village. All heads snapped towards the door as it opened and revealed Naruto in his Uzukage robes, with Hinata in a lavender kimono behind him. The civilian side was surprised to see the grandson of the 3rd Hokage, Sarutobi Konohamaru walk in behind them. Welcome. As you know, the village hidden in the leaves is now under my command. Therefore it is within my rights to change whatever I want. First things first. Hyuga Neji, do you have anything to report? All heads turned towards the deserted Hyuga as he stood up. Yes, Uzumaki-sama, I have. I have taken over the Hyuga main house. Sadly, I was unable to prevent the deaths of 3 of the 5 elders, who resisted until the end. The other 2, including Hyuga Hiashi, have surrendered after losing the duel I had with Hiashi-san. They have accepted the new rule and their banishment. The young man bowed and took a seat. The civilians really wanted to know how the hell this happened without anyone noticing. Very well. Then next up is the new formation of the council. Currently there are as much council members for the civilians as for the shinobi. No longer. There will be only 2 from now on, 1 representing the merchants and 1 the citizens. The 5, Soon to be two members that it related to stood up and screamed bloody murder. They all had a nice income thanks to their influential position. It wasn't until Naruto sent out a wave of killing intent, which quieted them down. I wasn't asking for your opinion. This village has always been a shinobi village. Decisions regarding the village should therefore be mainly decided by them and not the normal populace. The people are free to leave if they do not agree with a policy, unlike the ninja who will be branded and executed if they disagree. The shinobi side nodded. Since you have no leader at this moment and I have plenty to do with both my family and my village, I hereby instate Sarutobi Konohamaru as Nanadaime Hokage. I have trained him extensively over the past few years and have groomed him for this position. He is as wise for his age as his late grandfather was and will be an excellent leader. The room was a bit skeptical because of the boy's age. His lineage was without doubt good though, looking back at all the impressive shinobi they produced. Now that all that is out of the way, I hereby propose an alliance between Shin Uzushio and Konoha. X. When Naruto returned home with Hinata, his father-in-law Hiashi, sister-in-law Hanabi and the last of the original branch members of the Hyuga. The village cheered as their leader was home safe and sound. The new arrivals looked around in amazement and even more so when they saw their clan members so active in society, free from oppression. The Hyuga clan members went to their compound while Hiashi and Hanabi went to their next-door neighbors. They wanted to see their nephew's grandchildren, of course. Hanabi was reluctant to get the safeguard seal on her, fearing it was like the one her old home branded the servants with, but when Hinata showed the back of her neck, the spot where she had her own seal, Hanabi stopped struggling. Hiashi took it without difficulty as he knew it wasn't the same he was forced to use. Naruto showed him how to do it for future descendants of their clan. Never let it be said that the Hyugas don't show emotions. Hiashi had the biggest smile on his face when he met his 4-year-old granddaughter Yuka, and Hanabi literally squealed when handed her 1-year-old nephew Kanami. Anko and Tsunade sat around Naruto as he played with his 3 other children, 2 of them from Tsunade and 1 from Anko, who had 1 more on the way, and looked at him expectantly. They wanted to know what happened back in their home village. After telling them all that had happened, he had one last thing to say in regards of Konoha. Don't worry,